There's a fundamental difference between sharing and surrendering, and that difference is often blurred in the name of love, desire, or connection. We live in a culture that glorifies the idea of giving everything to someone, of complete emotional transparency, of radical vulnerability. But we seldom pause to ask, is this truly sharing or is it surrendering? And what are we surrendering really? Our stories, our values, our autonomy. Sharing is a choice. It's an intentional act where we offer something of ourselves with clarity, with a sense of agency. We decide what to show, how to show it, and to whom. But surrendering in the emotional sense often lacks that boundary. It spills, it floods. It happens when we're not sure what is ours anymore, because we've handed over the emotional reins to another person in the hope they will steer us toward love, belonging, or safety. It's not that surrender is always wrong. There is a certain beauty in letting go, in falling into someone. But when we call surrender sharing, we miss the truth of what's happening. We are giving more than we actually want to give, more than we are ready to give, and sometimes more than is even healthy. Intimacy becomes exposure when the act of revealing ourselves no longer feels like a conscious offering, but like a sacrifice. We think we are being open, but deep down we're hoping that if we bear enough of ourselves, if we show all the soft parts, if we bleed honestly, that the other person will finally meet us, hold us, stay. This is the seduction of surrender disguised as intimacy. We are told that vulnerability is strength, and yes, it can be. But vulnerability without containment, without discernment, becomes a leaking of the self. And when the self leaks long enough, it begins to vanish. Too often we measure love by how much we give up for it. We confuse endurance for loyalty. We romanticize the idea of being on open book, as though that is always the highest form of emotional maturity. But is it sometimes a fear in disguise? A fear of abandonment, of being left, of not being enough unless we are everything. We offer up our inner world like an altar, hoping someone will worship it instead of walk away. And in doing so, we quietly ask them to give us back our worth. But what if we never lost it? There is a subtle violence in confusing sharing with surrendering. It's the violence of self-erasure, of performing closeness without self-presence. When we surrender ourselves too quickly, too fully, it's not an act of devotion. It's often an echo of our earlier wounds, our earlier silencing. Maybe someone once taught us that to be loved, we had to be easy to love. That to be kept, we had to be soft, agreeable, available, endlessly so. So we learn to give everything, we learn to be pliable. We learn to shrink ourselves into someone else's need and call it intimacy. But intimacy without rootedness becomes theater. It becomes a performance of emotion rather than a truth of connection. We begin to show not what is real, but what we think will keep the other person close. We curate our wounds to seem deep, but not too threatening. We speak our needs softly, if at all. We offer our past, our body, our deepest fears, but always with the subtext, will you stay now? Do you love me more now? Have I finally earned you? And that subtext is where the truth lives. That's where the surrender becomes clear. When the act of revealing ourselves is motivated by the desire to secure another, rather than the desire to express ourselves fully, we have left the realm of sharing and entered the terrain of exposure. Exposure doesn't just mean nakedness. It means risk without safety. It means putting your most delicate parts on a table that might not be steady. And if that table collapses, the damage isn't just emotional, it's structural. You begin to question whether you ever had something worth protecting in the first place. Sharing implies containment. It says, I know who I am, and I trust you enough to show you this part of me. It doesn't demand reciprocity, but it respects balance. Surrender, when unconscious, says, I'll give you all of me, even if I lose me in the process. It carries the silent belief that the other person is the one holding the key, the meaning, the completion. And that belief can be intoxicating, because who doesn't want to be seen so deeply that they forget they once hid? But the cost is high. The cost is self-abandonment in the name of closeness. And while closeness can be healing, it is not a replacement for selfhood. When you surrender too much, too early, or without discernment, the intimacy you're building becomes porous. You don't just let the other in, you let yourself drain out. And then you're left wondering where you went. You're left wondering how someone who loved you could still not choose you. But maybe they didn't know who they were choosing, because you didn't show them you showed them your surrender. True intimacy requires a certain kind of strength. The strength to hold your own boundaries even in the face of love. The strength to say this part of me is sacred, not because it is hidden, but because it is whole. And it will not be offered as proof of my worth. It will be shared when I choose how I choose, not because I am afraid of being left, but because I am no longer willing to leave myself. This is not about withholding. It's not about being guarded or emotionally unavailable. It's about knowing that the deepest kind of love doesn't ask for all of you in one breath. It invites you to bring yourself forward piece by piece. From a place of trust, not need. It honors what you give because it doesn't demand it. It meets you where you are, not where you bleed. Understanding this difference between sharing and surrendering isn't just about relationships. It's about the way we relate to ourselves. It's about the quiet negotiations we make internally when we feel unworthy. It's about the stories we tell ourselves about what love should look like and what we must become to deserve it. And sometimes it's about realizing that the parts of ourselves we thought we needed to give away were the very parts we were meant to keep sacred. We live in a world that teaches us to strive to be chosen. From childhood, we are conditioned to seek approval, to long for that look of recognition, to believe that if someone selects us, whether in love, in friendship, or in family, we are somehow more real, more valuable, more complete. The desire to be chosen is ancient and it is human. But somewhere along the way, we began to confuse being chosen with being seen. We started to believe that the one who picks us must surely understand us, that selection equals understanding, that affection means recognition, that love means sight. But it doesn't always. Being chosen is seductive. It makes us feel special, selected out of a crowd, like there's something inherently worthy in us that someone else finally recognized. But being seen goes deeper. Being seen means someone has taken the time to witness us, to understand our contradictions, our quiet places, our fears, and our rhythms. It's not just the surface of us that is loved. It's the messy, complicated, unpolished parts too. But when we're hungry for validation, we're willing to accept being chosen without being seen. And in doing so, we risk abandoning ourselves in subtle but painful ways. There are many relationships where one feels intensely loved but never truly known. You feel wanted, desired, even praised, but when you speak from your rawness, your uncertainty, your emotional core, there is no room for it. You begin to tailor yourself to fit the image they've fallen in love with. You become an echo of their projection, not the full truth of your experience. You smile when you want to cry. You give when you need to receive. You nod along with their fantasy, hoping that one day they'll notice the parts of you that don't fit in the story they've written. And that gap, the distance between being chosen and being seen, is where the cost accumulates. You can go years in a relationship being everything someone wants and still feel profoundly invisible. You can be praised for your strength when what you actually need is permission to be soft. You can be admired for your resilience when inside you're quietly begging to be held in your fragility. But because they chose you, you assume they must know you. You mistake their desire for understanding, and that mistake can become a quiet edge that shapes your sense of self. To be chosen is to be elevated, sometimes even idealized. You are placed on a pedestal built from their needs, their expectations, their version of you. And so long as you perform that version well, the love continues. But being seen, that demands vulnerability, not performance. It asks that we show not just our light, but our shadow. That we stop curating ourselves for comfort and begin revealing ourselves for truth. It means letting someone witness our contradictions without trying to resolve them. It means saying, this is who I am today, even if I change tomorrow. Will you stay anyway? But it's risky to want to be seen. Being seen makes us accountable to our truth. It means we can no longer hide behind the illusion of perfection or play the role we think earns us love. It requires us to ask, who am I when I'm not trying to be lovable? Who am I when I'm not trying to be chosen? Who am I when I stop performing the version of myself I think the world wants? This reckoning can be painful because it often reveals that we've built relationships on the fragile foundation of performance. We've handed people a mask and called it our face. We've hoped that if we're beautiful enough, calm enough, generous enough, sexual enough, low maintenance enough, we'll finally be safe. And when the mask is admired, we tell ourselves we are loved. But deep down, we know the truth: we are not loved. We are accepted on the condition of our compliance. And that conditionality is a slow erosion of the soul. When you are chosen but not seen, love becomes labor. You work endlessly to keep the fantasy alive. You check yourself constantly. Did I say too much, need too much, feel too much? You start editing your emotional truth to protect their comfort. You shrink your voice to fit their hearing. You contort your needs into silence. And every time you do that, you drift further from your core. You become a stranger to your own longing. You wake up one day and realize that you have built a relationship on the premise that your fullness is too much, that your truth is inconvenient, that your inner life must be managed like a threat. This is not love. This is survival in the disguise of intimacy. It is the fear of being too much wrapped in the hope of being enough. It is the desperate hunger to be accepted, even if it means being misunderstood. And when that becomes your standard for connection, you start abandoning yourself in the small moments. You don't say what you feel. You don't ask for what you need. You smile when you're lonely. You stay when you want to leave. You minimize your hurt so someone else doesn't have to feel discomfort. You apologize for your truth before it even has the chance to breathe. We call this compromise, we call it maturity. But often it's a quiet betrayal of the self. A betrayal that feels noble because it keeps the peace. A betrayal that feels romantic because it secures the relationship. A betrayal that we justify because we tell ourselves, at least I'm not alone. But what kind of company is it if you cannot be fully yourself in it? What kind of love is it if it only thrives when you disappear? Being seen is terrifying precisely because it is honest. It does not guarantee acceptance. It does not guarantee safety. But it does guarantee self-respect. It calls us into a kind of connection that is rooted not in fantasy, but in truth. And truth is where intimacy actually begins. It's not in the flawless presentation. It's in the trembling voice, the quiet confession, the moment when you say, I'm afraid, but I'm going to show you this anyway. The irony is that we long to be seen, but we spend so much of our time trying to be chosen. We forget that real love, the kind that nourishes rather than depletes, only grows where there is truth. And truth demands that we let go of being chosen at the expense of being known. It asks us to risk being misunderstood in order to live in alignment with ourselves. It asks us to stop begging for scraps of attention and start offering our presence as something sacred. You are not here to be digested by someone else's hunger. You are not here to become a mirror for someone else's longing. You are not here to be shaped by someone's desire to possess you. You are here to live fully, to love bravely, to speak clearly, to show up as you are, not as someone else's idea of who you should be. There are contracts we sign without ink, without words, without conscious awareness, and yet they shape the course of our emotional lives. These are the silent agreements we make when we love too deeply without boundaries, when we give ourselves fully in the hope that our love alone will be enough to heal, to keep, to secure. They are born not out of logic but out of longing. And often they originate in the places where we were once unseen, unheard, unheld. So when we encounter love again, especially the kind that feels intense or redemptive, we unconsciously enter into an emotional contract. I will give you everything, and in return, you will never leave me. I will carry your pain, and you will love me more for it. I will abandon myself if it means you stay. These contracts are rarely spoken aloud, but they are deeply binding. They guide our behavior, our responses, our emotional availability. We don't just give, we overgive. We don't just love, we merge. We don't just care, we carry. We begin to measure the strength of the relationship by how much of ourselves we can endure losing without complaint. And somewhere in that endurance, we call it love. But love without boundaries is not love. It's survival dressed in the language of devotion. It is the echo of a belief that says if I'm good enough, selfless enough, quiet enough, giving enough, I will finally be chosen. And so we enter into these silent contracts hoping they will shield us from rejection. We think that if we anticipate every need, forgive every hurt, absorb every disappointment, the person we love will never leave us. But what we're actually doing is abandoning ourselves in small, imperceptible ways until we no longer recognize who we are outside of that relationship. This pattern often begins early. Perhaps as children, we learned that love was conditional, that care had to be earned, that affection came at the cost of compliance. We became emotional barometers for our caregivers, learning to adapt, to soothe, to disappear when necessary. That adaptation becomes our default. It follows us into adulthood, into intimacy. So when we find someone who ignites our longing, we slide effortlessly back into that old role. We become attuned to their moods, their silence, their needs, while slowly becoming deaf to our own. We convince ourselves this is maturity, that this is the price of loving someone deeply, that relationships require sacrifice. And yes, relationships do require compromise, effort, empathy. But what they do not require is erasure. What they do not ask for, if they are healthy, is that you silence your truth to make room for someone else's comfort. Yet when we are operating from old wounds, from unexamined patterns, we mistake suffering for loyalty. We think that the more we endure, the more we are proving our love. But what we are actually proving is our fear, that deep, gnawing fear that says, I am not lovable unless I'm useful. I am not worthy unless I am giving. I am not enough unless I am sacrificing. These silent contracts are fueled by the belief that love must be earned through selflessness. But selflessness, when habitual, becomes self-abandonment. And self-abandonment over time becomes resentment. We begin to notice the imbalance, the exhaustion, the aching quiet of unmet needs. But instead of voicing them, we double down. We try harder. We give more. We hope that our devotion will speak what our voice does not. But no one can hear what you do not say, and no one can meet needs that have never been named. It is here, in the quiet accumulation of unmet needs, that the silent contract starts to show its cracks. You feel invisible even though you're always available. You feel lonely even though you're never alone. You feel taken for granted even though you've given without limits. And still, you hesitate to pull back. Because what if your worth in the relationship is directly tied to how much you do, how much you give, how little you ask for? What if the moment you stop over-functioning, the love disappears? This fear is not irrational. It's born from real experiences where love was withdrawn when we asserted boundaries, where affection was withheld when we asked for more. But healing does not come from reenacting the original injury. Healing comes from breaking the contract, from writing a new one where love and self-respect coexist, one where presence does not require performance, one where connection is mutual, not extracted. To do this requires a reckoning with our own patterns. It means asking hard questions. Am I giving from love or from fear? Am I showing up because I want to or because I feel I have to? Am I silent because I value peace or because I'm afraid of conflict? These questions are not accusations, they are invitations. Invitations to return to ourselves, to remember that our needs are not burdens, that our feelings are not threats, that our limits are not flaws. When we begin to name these silent contracts, we loosen their grip. We begin to limit the parts of ourselves we gave away too quickly, too completely. We begin to see that the love we were offering was beautiful, but it was also begging to be seen, to be met. To be valued not for how little we needed, but for how honestly we could show up. And as we reclaim those parts, we start to love differently. We start to speak differently. We begin to understand that real intimacy is not built on sacrifice, it's built on mutual recognition, on choosing each other without disappearing inside each other. It is tempting to believe that love should hurt, that the deeper the love, the greater the cost. But that belief often belongs to the wounded child within us who was taught that safety came through service, that love had to be earned through silence, that presence depended on performance, that survival required suppression. And that child deserves something different now. That child deserves a love where they don't have to prove their worth, where they don't have to trade their truth for connection, where they don't have to sign a contract that asks them to vanish in order to be loved. To love deeply without losing yourself is possible. But it starts with seeing the difference between giving and giving yourself away, between compromise and collapse, between loving someone and becoming responsible for their emotional landscape. You are allowed to care without carrying. You are allowed to love without leaking. You are allowed to stay connected to yourself while staying connected to another. And any love that demands otherwise is not love, it's control, it's need. It's an old story asking to be rewritten. There is a fundamental difference between giving and losing. We often use the language of love to explain away our own disappearance. We say we gave too much, but we don't ask why we gave it. We say we were loyal, but we don't name what we abandoned in the process. Giving without losing is a skill, it is a discipline. It is a way of being that requires deep self-awareness, self-respect, and an unshakable understanding that love is not a transaction of self-erasure. It is not measured by how much of ourselves we can live without. It is not proven by how silently we endure. Too many of us have been taught that love is about proving, that our worth is confirmed in how much we can tolerate, that devotion is displayed in our ability to be everything, hold everything, carry everything. We enter into relationships ready to give all, to offer all, believing that to love someone is to become whatever they need. We think if we just love well enough, hard enough, endlessly enough, the other person will finally fill the space where we feel empty. But this kind of giving is not giving, it is seeking, it is negotiating, it is the hope that if we give all of ourselves away, we'll finally be enough. When we give ourselves away, we are not loving. We are hoping to be loved. We are trading pieces of ourselves in the silent belief that the more we give, the less likely we are to be abandoned. And often we don't even realize we're doing it. We say yes when we want to say no. We stay quiet when something inside us wants to scream. We tolerate patterns that chip away at our spirit. We shape-shift to avoid conflict, to keep the peace, to not seem too much. We twist ourselves into versions that feel more acceptable, more desirable, more lovable. And it's easy to mistake this for generosity. It's easy to call it empathy, to say we're just being understanding, or supportive, or low maintenance. But there's a difference between empathy and over-functioning. There's a difference between being supportive and abandoning your own needs. There's a difference between being loving and being absent from yourself. When giving turns into leaking, when we are no longer deciding what we share, but simply bleeding into the space of another person, we lose the ability to know what is truly ours. Reclaiming the ability to give without losing requires an internal pause. It requires a return to the body, to the self, to the quiet center that asks, is this mine to carry? Is this my truth? Am I speaking or performing? Am I giving because I have enough to give, or because I am afraid of what will happen if I stop? These are not simple questions. They are questions that require us to revisit the parts of ourselves that learned to love through sacrifice. The parts that equated being needed with being valued. The parts that felt invisible unless we were fixing, rescuing, soothing, proving. Those parts need compassion, not judgment. They were born in environments where survival sometimes required disappearing, where our needs were too much or not understood or not safe to express, where we learned that love had to be earned. And so, as adults, we unconsciously repeat those patterns. We give what we were never given. We overcompensate for our own lack. We love others in the ways we wish someone would have loved us. And in doing so, we sometimes forget that we deserve to be on the receiving end too. That love is not only about what we offer, it is about what we allow ourselves to receive. Learning to give without losing is also about reimagining what strength looks like. Many of us were taught that strength is quiet, passive, endures without complaint. That strength is being unbothered, being unaffected, being endlessly available. But true strength is rooted in clarity. It is the ability to stay present with your own needs, even when it's uncomfortable. It is the courage to speak up, even when your voice shakes. It is the resilience to stay connected to yourself when everything around you asks you to disconnect. Boundaries are the language of this kind of strength. They are not walls. They are bridges that allow connection without sacrifice. They are not about pushing others away. They are about keeping yourself intact. A boundary says, I love you and I will not abandon myself to keep you close. I care and I also matter. You are important and so am I. This is not selfishness, it is self-honoring. And any love that does not make space for your wholeness is not love. It is a demand for you to shrink. There is grief in learning to give without losing. Because it often means acknowledging how many times we didn't know the difference. How many times we called our disappearance love. How many times we celebrated our own selflessness, not realizing it was actually our fear speaking. The fear that we are only lovable when we are useful, that we are only safe when we are small, that we are only worthy when we are giving. But with that grief comes a new possibility. The possibility of relationships where you are not loved for what you do, but for who you are. Relationships where your boundaries are not seen as rejections, but as invitations to know you more deeply. Relationships where love is not earned through exhaustion, but given freely from a place of abundance rather than depletion. Giving from abundance is a different experience. It is not rooted in fear, but in choice. It is not about proving, but about expressing. It is not desperate, it is deliberate. When you give from abundance, you are still present with yourself. You are still rooted in your own needs, your own values, your own truth. You are able to say yes without resentment and no without guilt. You are able to love generously, not compulsively. You are able to stay connected to another without disconnecting from yourself. And this changes everything. It changes the way you show up in love. It changes the kind of love you are willing to accept. It changes the expectations you have, not just of others, but of yourself. You stop seeing love as something you must earn through sacrifice and begin to understand it as something you cultivate through mutual presence. Through honesty, through the ability to say, I can love you deeply and still protect myself. I can be open without being porous. I can be present with your pain without losing my place in the room. To give without losing is not an act of withholding. It is an act of balance, of integrity, of deep trust in your own worth. It is the knowing that you do not have to disappear to be loved. It is the knowing that you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions at the expense of your own. It is the decision to remain whole, even when the world asks you to fragment. It is the quiet revolution of self, honoring in the face of a culture that romanticizes burnout and calls it devotion. The parts we never give are not hidden because they are shameful. They are hidden because they are sacred. These are the inner terrains we guard, the stories we rarely tell, the emotions we barely name even to ourselves. They are the quiet places within us, the places that still tremble with old echoes, that still carry the scent of memory, of yearning, of fear. These parts are not less worthy. They are simply more intimate. And it takes something more than attraction, more than affection to reach them. It takes trust. It takes resonance. It takes a sense that the other person can hold what is fragile without breaking it, can witness what is real without turning away. We don't withhold these parts out of manipulation or caution. We withhold them because we are waiting for the rare moment when we feel truly safe, when we sense that someone is not just interested in consuming us, but in truly seeing us. The parts we never give include the things we've survived, the truths we've edited, the longings we've tried to outgrow, the questions we still can't answer. These are the parts that don't present well, that don't always have language, that don't look polished under light. They carry the emotional weight of our becoming, and we don't offer them lightly, because to give them is not just to share, it is to trust. It is to risk. Sometimes someone enters our life who makes that risk feel possible. They don't demand access. They don't rush the story. They don't invade our silence. They wait. They create a presence spacious enough for us to expand into slowly. And before we even realize it, we're offering pieces we never thought we'd share. We find ourselves saying things we've never said, not because they asked, but because their presence made the truth rise. This kind of giving is not a transaction. It is a transmission. It is a moment of deep alignment where our internal gates open because they sense the other person will not weaponize our vulnerability. But this act, this offering, is never small. To give the parts we never give is to allow someone access to our emotional DNA. It is to say, here is the place where I still ache, where I still wonder, where I still hope. Here is the place where I am not yet healed. And I don't need you to fix it. I just need you to see it and not flinch. And in that seeing, there is a profound kind of intimacy, not based in performance, not built on roles or expectations, but rooted in presence. It is the intimacy of being known in the places we most often keep hidden. These sacred parts hold our original fears and original dreams. They contain the beliefs we built in silence, the conclusions we came to when no one was listening, the tenderness that survived all the hardening. They are shaped by our earliest relationships, where we learned what to say and what to suppress, what was allowed and what was punished. We carry these lessons long after the original moment has passed. We carry them into adulthood, into intimacy, into our own inner dialogues. And unless we consciously unlearn them, they continue to inform how and when we reveal ourselves. It's not uncommon to find ourselves in relationships where we give everything but the most sacred parts. We may share our body, our time, our thoughts, but not the raw, unfiltered pieces. Not the places where we're still in process. Not the corners where we still feel uncertain. Not the truths that make us feel too messy, too intense, too tender. We fear that if we show those parts, the other person will see us differently, leave, or worse, stay but never fully understand. And so we edit, we perform. We narrate our lives in a way that feels digestible. We stay on safe terrain. But withholding sacred parts doesn't mean we're lying. It means we're surviving. It means we've learned to protect ourselves by staying within emotional range. We've learned to only give what feels manageable to lose. Because the sacred parts, if mishandled, can wound us again, can reopen something old, can reinforce the belief that even our most honest self is unlovable. So we protect them, sometimes fiercely, even from the people we love, especially from the people we love. The paradox, of course, is that we crave to be known. We long for someone who can witness our whole self and still stay. But to be known means we must first reveal. And to reveal, we must first feel safe. That's why the parts we never give are so important. They are the threshold to our real self. And when we finally choose to give them, it is not an act of surrender. It is an act of profound courage. It is the moment when we say, I am done hiding this. I am done protecting myself from your perception. I am choosing to let you see me, even here. That moment can change everything, not just for the relationship, but for ourselves. Because something happens when we are witnessed in our fullness. We feel less alone. We feel more real. We begin to understand that what we have always protected may not be so dangerous after all. That maybe the world won't collapse if we stop curating. That maybe our softest parts aren't weaknesses, but doorways to connection. But not every person deserves those parts. And that's what makes the offering sacred. It is not for everyone. It is for the ones who listen deeply, who hold space without judgment, who can meet you where you are without needing you to perform healing. It is for the rare connections where your nervous system exhales, where your truth doesn't feel like a liability, where you are not required to be inspirational in your pain, where you are allowed to be unfinished. Giving the parts we never give is not about trauma dumping. It is not about laying everything bare indiscriminately. It is about discernment. It is about intimacy. It is about asking, can I be this honest here? Can I be this real here? Will this part of me be honored or harmed? And if it is honored, something beautiful unfolds. The relationship deepens, the mask softens, the inner child breathes a little easier. Because for the first time, perhaps she is no longer alone with her story. We live in a time of oversharing and underconnecting. We post everything but reveal nothing. We flood conversations with information but starve them of meaning. We mistake exposure for intimacy. But true intimacy is quiet. It happens in the pauses, in the subtleties, in the moment when someone says without needing to say, I see you, all of you, and I'm still here. This is what the parts we never give are waiting for. Not grand gestures, not declarations, just presence, just patience, just someone who sees the offering and receives it with reverence. Because when we offer these parts, we are not just sharing, we are extending trust. We are saying this is me without the polish, without the performance. Can you meet me here? And when the answer is yes, something ancient inside us heals. Not because someone completed us, but because we dared to show up fully and found we could still be held. We dared to offer the parts we never give. And they were not too much. They were not rejected. They were met. And in that meeting, something sacred returned to us that we didn't even know we had lost.